My name is Rebecca Thompson. I was 31 years old working as a high school librarian in Seattle, living quietly in a small apartment near Pike Place, when one ordinary Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang, and everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. I was shelving returns in the quiet stacks, half listening to the usual chatter from students in the distance when my cell buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me step into the hallway and answer. Miss Thompson, this is David from Puget Sound Credit Union. I'm calling about your mortgage on the Bellevue property. You're 6 months behind on a $682,000 loan. For a second, the words didn't register. I blinked hard. I'm sorry, what mortgage? He repeated the amount slowly, then read the address. Bellevue. The upscale craftsman house my brother Daniel had been posting about non-stop on Instagram for months. Golden hour shots of the patio captions like finally living the dream. I'd scrolled past them without a second thought. My stomach dropped. I lived paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom rental with creaky floors and a view of the market crowds. I had no down payment, no cosigner, no plans to own anything in this economy. This had to be identity theft, a scam. But the account was already on my credit report. My name, my social security number, my signature looking almost exactly like mine on every document. I ended the call as politely as I could, walked straight to the staff restroom, locked the door, and pulled up the full credit report with shaking hands. There it was, the mortgage, a home equity line, maxed credit cards, a personal loan, all in my name, all tied to that Bellevue address. The score that used to be clean had tanked overnight. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, watching my own face harden from confusion into something colder, sharper. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had used my identity to build a life they couldn't afford, and deep down, I already knew exactly who. And the worst part? The people who raised us would probably beg me to let it go. If this sounds familiar, hit like and subscribe for more real family stories. Sometimes a single phone call changes everything. I wonder how many of you have had that moment. That evening, I drove back to my apartment near Pike Place in the steady Seattle rain, the wipers sweeping rhythmically across the windshield as the city lights smeared into streaks of gold and red. I parked in the narrow lot, climbed the stairs, and let the door click shut behind me, sealing out the noise of the market below. The apartment was small and lived-in books everywhere, stacked on shelves that sagged under their weight, piled on the coffee table, even leaning against the baseboards like silent sentinels. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my damp shoes, and sank onto the couch without turning on more than the single lamp. No fancy lighting here, no designer pieces, just the quiet routine I had chosen. I used my PTO for library book fairs or quiet afternoons with a novel, not weekend getaways or status updates. It felt steady, uncomplicated, and until today it had been enough. But tonight the quiet pressed in. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened Daniel's Instagram again, thumb scrolling through the recent posts almost against my will. The Bellevue house appeared in every third photo. Wide windows catching the late sun. Megan arranging flowers on the dining table, Lucas and Sophia chasing each other across the lawn, with captions full of effortless gratitude. Grateful for this chapter. Dream home unlocked. Daniel had always carried the spotlight effortlessly. Growing up, he was the one who brought home the awards, the one our parents pointed to when company came over. He became the lawyer with the polished briefcase and the confident handshake, while I stayed in the background organizing reading programs and shelving returns. At family dinners in Tacoma, he would lean back in his chair, recounting courtroom victories or new client wins, and everyone listened. William would raise his glass and say things like, "That's my boy making it happen." Patricia would beam and refill his plate first. Amanda and I would sit across from each other exchanging small smiles, but the conversation always circled back to him. I set the phone face down and rubbed my eyes. A few months earlier, at Thanksgiving in Tacoma, the house had smelled of sage and roasted turkey. Daniel arrived late as usual, flashing that easy grin, and while we were all in the kitchen, he asked if he could borrow my ID for a minute. Quick thing for online banking, he said, already pulling out his phone. Won't take long. I shrugged and handed it over without a second thought. He was my brother, the one who fixed everyone's problems. He snapped a photo, gave it back, and we went on with dinner. William carved the turkey and praised Daniel's latest case. Patricia fussed over whether I had eaten enough, and Amanda mentioned her own job updates in passing. Daniel pulled up photos of a potential house on his phone and passed it around, saying, "This could be the one perfect location." Everyone oohed and awed. I smiled and nodded like always. But now that memory replayed differently. Had he used that photo right then to start building the profile? The email one character off from mine, the forged signatures that looked close enough to pass digital checks, had it begun that casually, over turkey and pie I stood up and paced to the window, watching rain trace paths down the glass. Those dinners in Tacoma had always felt like the center of our world, William pouring wine with deliberate care, Patricia insisting we take home leftovers, Amanda quietly observing while Daniel held court. Patricia would turn to me with that gentle concern. "Rebecca, honey, when are you going to think about settling down? A house, a partner, something more permanent." I'd laugh it off, say I was happy with my books and my routines. Amanda would shoot me a look that said she understood, but she never pushed. Daniel would change the subject back to himself, showing off the latest luxury detail in his life, and the table would follow. I never minded. I liked the background. It was safe there. Yet tonight, the background felt exposed. I had handed him my ID like it was nothing because family meant trust without question. Now that trust looked like the perfect opening, the quiet sister who never checked statements closely, who wouldn't make a scene. I walked back to the couch and sat heavily. There were moments when family wrapped around you like armor, when love meant protection. But there were also moments when you realized the armor had holes, and the people closest to you might be the ones slipping through them. Tomorrow I would drive to the bank and demand the documents. Tonight, I simply let the realization settle the brother I had defended and admired might have turned my name into his shortcut. And if that was true, the next family dinner in Tacoma would never feel the same again. The next morning I woke early, the rain still tapping against the window like it had all night, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and drove downtown Seattle through the morning traffic, the skyline sharp against the gray sky. Puget Sound. Credit Union was in a sleek glass building near the waterfront, and I parked in the underground garage, my heart pounding harder with every floor the elevator climbed. I walked in, showed my ID at the desk, and asked to speak to the manager about a fraud dispute. They led me to a small conference room with gray walls and a single potted plant that looked too perfect to be real. The manager, a woman named Karen Ellis, arrived a few minutes later with a thick folder and a calm professionalism that made the whole thing feel even more surreal. She slid the folder across the table and opened it to the loan application. There were pages of documents, closing disclosures, income statements, digital signature logs, all bearing my name, and a signature that looked almost exactly like mine, but not quite. The curves were too rounded in places, the lines too hesitant. The stated income was $196,000 a year, more than 4 times what I made at the library. I let out a short, breathless laugh that sounded foreign in the quiet room. Karen's expression shifted to concern. "If you're saying you didn't authorize this, Miss Thompson, this is identity theft. We'll need to start the dispute process right away, but first let's confirm what you see." I nodded and flipped through the pages, my fingers cold. The email address listed was rebecca.thompsonmpl@gmail.com, one letter off from my real one, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. The mortgage had closed, online documents uploaded digitally, no in-person visit required. Everything pointed to someone who knew exactly how to make it look legitimate. Then my phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer on speaker so Karen could hear. A man's voice came through, sharp and impatient. "This is collections for Puget Sound Credit. Your account is seriously delinquent. We need payment today or we'll escalate to foreclosure proceedings. $682,000 doesn't pay itself. My pulse spiked. I stammered that it was fraud that I was sitting in the bank right now, but he cut me off with practiced aggression. We've heard that before. Pay up or face consequences. I hung up fast, hands trembling so badly the phone nearly slipped. Karen looked at me with real sympathy. That's standard collector tactics, they don't know the fraud yet. But this call proves the delinquency is already hitting collections. We need to freeze everything now. I asked for copies of all documents and stepped outside to call Nicole. She picked up on the first ring. I told her about the bank visit, the signature, the email, the collector call. She listened without interrupting, then said quietly, "Send me photos of the signature pages. I have a contact who does handwriting forensics for legal cases. He can compare it to samples from your license or old checks." I did it right there on the sidewalk, uploading the scans. An hour later, Nicole texted back, "He says it's forged." Clever work, but the pressure points are off, and the IP trace on the upload leads to an old condo address in Seattle that matches Daniel's previous place. He used your info but routed it through his own location, ironic, right? Hiding in plain sight with your name on the deed. My breath caught. The condo he had lived in before moving to Bellevue, the one I'd visited for his housewarming years ago. Nicole called again immediately after. "Rebecca, this isn't an accident. This is deliberate strategy. They built debt on your credit, probably planning to default and let it ruin you while they walk away clean. You need to file with authorities today. Fraud alert, police report, everything. Don't wait." I stood there on the sidewalk, rain starting again, feeling the weight of it all settle deeper. When things start unraveling like this, you realize some families' secrets can destroy everything in their path, and sometimes silence isn't protection at all. It's just the easiest way for the damage to spread. A few days later, I found myself at a small coffee shop downtown Seattle, tucked into a corner table with the folder spread out in front of me, and the hum of conversation fading into background noise. The place was busy, but anonymous people typing on laptops, baristas, calling orders, steam rising from cups, and it felt safer than my apartment for digging through the copies Karen had given me. I sipped black coffee that had gone cold and flipped through the pages again, cross-referencing dates and amounts. The more I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Charges timed right after major posts from Daniel and Megan, small luxuries that added up fast. I opened Instagram on my phone and searched Megan's profile, scrolling past the polished feed until I landed on the latest family shots. Lucas grinning in a new jacket, Sophia holding a stuffed animal in the backyard, captions full of warmth and normalcy. Nothing better than these moments. The irony hit hard. Their happy family life was built on debt that carried my name, every smile funded by the credit they had quietly drained from me. I zoomed in on one photo, the kids laughing on the patio, and felt a sharp pang. Those children had no idea their new home was paid for with my identity. Nicole arrived right on time, sliding into the seat across from me with 2 fresh coffees and a look that said she had already pieced together more than I wanted to admit. She set her bag down and leaned in. "Show me what you got." I pushed the folder toward her. She scanned the documents quickly, then pulled out her own phone and showed me a text from her dealership friend Daniel, and Megan had tried leasing a new SUV a month earlier. The application ran their credit first tanked hard, from the maxed cards and late payments already showing up. They paid cash instead, but the salesman remembered the tension, Megan fidgeting, Daniel forcing a smile. The whole transaction rushed like they were covering tracks. Nicole set her phone down. They were scrambling. Cash for a car that expensive doesn't come from nowhere, especially not when you're already underwater on a mortgage. This wasn't a one-off mistake, it's a pattern. Her words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the guilt I had been trying to push down. My phone rang before I could respond. "Patricia." I hesitated, then answered in a low voice. "Hey, Mom." She sounded concerned right away. "Rebecca, you okay? You sounded off last time we talked and I haven't heard from you. You look tired in the photos Amanda sent." I forced a casual tone. "Just busy at the library, nothing major." She pressed gently. You know you can talk to me about anything. We're family. The word landed like a weight. I mumbled something about work and ended the call quickly, but the guilt twisted inside me. Lucas and Sophia, innocent, bright kids who had nothing to do with this. If I pushed forward, their world would crack open. How could I be the one to shatter that? Yet every time I looked at the documents, the question came back. Why was it always me making the sacrifice? The photos on my phone stared back at me, the perfect family facade mocking the truth underneath. Nicole watched my face and spoke softly but firmly. I know what you're thinking. Those kids are sweet and Patricia's guilt tripping is textbook. But don't let biology discount what they did. This wasn't an emergency loan, it was calculated theft. They chose to use your name because they knew you'd hesitate. If you stay quiet, you're letting them win again. She paused. You deserve to protect yourself. The folder's ready, take it to dinner this weekend. Let them see what they've done. I stared at the photos one last time, the perfect smiles, the curated life, and felt something shift inside me. The guilt was real, but so was the anger. Those moments like this force you to ask the hard question. Does loving your family mean accepting everything they do, or does it sometimes mean choosing to protect yourself before there's nothing left to protect? The weekend arrived faster than I expected, and I found myself driving south to Tacoma with the folder heavy on the passenger seat, the weight of it pressing against my ribs the whole way. The road was familiar highway cutting through evergreen trees, the sky low and gray, but today every mile felt charged. I parked outside my parents' house, the same modest two-story, with the porch light always on, and walked up the steps carrying the evidence like a bomb I was about to detonate. Inside, the smell of roast beef and garlic hit me first, the table already set with Patricia's good plates, and William pouring wine into mismatched glasses. Amanda was there chatting about her kitchen renovation, while Daniel and Megan arrived just behind me, Daniel flashing his usual grin, Megan balancing a bottle of red like nothing was wrong. We sat down, plates past, small talk flowing. Patricia asking about the library, William commenting on the weather, Amanda showing photos of her new backsplash. Daniel steered things to the Bellevue house, voice full of pride as he described the sunroom in detail, how the light poured in at golden hour, how perfect it was for family photos. It's everything we wanted, he said, pulling out his phone to show a quick shot of the space. Megan smiled tightly beside him, nodding along. I waded through the main course fork, moving mechanically, heart rate climbing with every bite until the plates were cleared and the room quieted for dessert. My hand closed around the folder under the table. I pulled it out and set it in the center with a soft thud that silenced everything. This is a report from the authorities, I said, voice steady, despite the hammering in my chest. Filed 3 days ago. Identity theft fraud. A mortgage I never signed for the house in Bellevue. All in my name. Daniel's smile froze mid-sentence. Megan's eyes widened, hand flying to her mouth. William straightened slowly. Patricia let out a small gasp, fork clattering against her plate. I opened the folder and slid the key pages forward, the forged signature, the fake income, the email one digit off, the IP trace linking back to Daniel's old condo. The collector calls started this week. Foreclosure threats. My credit is ruined. And you two are living in the house that's technically mine. The room went dead quiet except for the faint tick of the wall clock. Daniel recovered first, shaking his head with forced calm. This is ridiculous, Rebecca. There must be some mix-up. But Megan cracked almost immediately, voice breaking as tears welled up. It was supposed to be temporary. We were drowning Daniel's cases, dried up the lifestyle we had to keep up with. Your credit was perfect and you weren't using it. We thought we could fix it before anyone noticed. She looked at me pleadingly. We just needed time. I cut in before Daniel could speak. Time. You maxed cards, took out loans, planned to file bankruptcy in my name. You weren't going to fix anything, you were going to let it collapse on me. Daniel exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. We were going to pay it back once things turned around. It wasn't personal. Amanda stared at him in shock. How could you do that to your own sister? William's face darkened. He stood slowly, chair scraping the floor. Get out, both of you. We'll handle the rest, but not under this roof. Patricia reached for his arm, tears starting. William, please. But he shook his head. No, this ends now. Megan started crying quietly, shoulders shaking while Daniel stood without another word, took her arm, and they left. The door closed behind them with a final click that echoed through the house. When everything explodes across the dinner table like that, you realize some fractures in a family never heal, and perhaps they aren't meant to. The week after the dinner in Tacoma unfolded like a slow-motion collapse that no one could stop watching. By Monday morning, the Seattle Times had run the story "Local Lawyer Under Investigation for Identity Theft and Fraud," the headline stark above a photo of the Bellevue house with its wide windows and manicured lawn. The article named Daniel but protected my identity, detailing the forged mortgage, the inflated income claims, and the authorities' active probe. Texts flooded my phone from distant relatives, former colleagues, even a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the news. Is this real? Thinking of you, call if you need anything. I turned off notifications, put the phone in a drawer, and tried to lose myself in library routines, but the whispers followed me down the aisles. A coworker asked quietly if I was okay. Another offered to cover my shifts. I shook my head and kept working, but the story had legs in local circles, spreading through group chats and coffee breaks. Late Tuesday, an email arrived from an unknown sender, subject line empty. The body was brief and chilling. Drop the charges or things get worse for everyone involved. Think about the children. No signature, no return address, just that veiled threat hanging in the inbox like smoke. My hands went cold as I read it twice, then forwarded it straight to the authorities as evidence of witness intimidation. The fear was immediate, sharp enough to make me check the locks twice before bed, scan the street outside my apartment for unfamiliar cars. But beneath the fear, something else hardened: determination. If they were willing to threaten me now, they had already crossed every line. I wouldn't back down. Patricia called Wednesday evening, her voice fragile over the line. Rebecca, please. Lucas keeps asking why Daddy isn't coming home. He drew a picture of the sunroom today. Sophia won't sleep without her blanket from the new house. Megan is barely holding it together. She cries all night. They need their mother. Can't we find a way to handle this quietly for the kids? Her words landed like stones in my chest. I pictured Lucas's drawings, Sophia's small face pressed against a pillow, and for a moment the resolve wavered. How could I be the reason their world shattered? The guilt surged hot and familiar. But the threat email flashed in my mind, the anonymous warning, the ruined credit, the years of calculated lies. I took a breath. Mom, this isn't about hurting anyone. It's about what was done to me. I can't pretend it didn't happen. She started sobbing softly, pleading again, but I ended the call before my own tears came. Nicole showed up at my apartment the next afternoon without warning, 2 coffees in hand, and a determined look that cut through the haze. She sat on the couch and met my eyes. If a stranger had stolen your identity, threatened you, ruined your credit, would you hesitate for 1 second to press charges? I shook my head slowly. No. She nodded once. Then why give them a pass just because they're blood? They knew what they were doing every step. Come with me to the authorities' office tomorrow. Give your full statement. Let the process run. We drove together Friday morning to the federal building in Seattle, the folder thicker now with the threatening email printout and updated credit alerts. In a plain interview room, I recounted the timeline again: the forged documents, the collector harassment, the dinner confrontation, the anonymous email. The agent listened without interruption, jotting notes, then confirmed they were advancing to formal charges: identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud. Daniel and Megan would face federal court. The tension didn't vanish. It transformed into something quieter, more certain, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. Those days afterward taught me that justice sometimes comes at the cost of permanent silence from the people who once called themselves family. 9 months later, the fallout had settled into something permanent and irreversible, the kind of ending that leaves no room for second chances or easy forgiveness. Daniel pleaded guilty in federal court to identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The plea deal spared him a longer trial, but cost him 20 months in a low-security federal facility outside Tacoma. Megan, who had cooperated fully from the start and provided key testimony against him, received 15 months. The Bellevue house sold quickly, at a steep loss to satisfy part of the creditors, but the remaining debt pushed them both into personal bankruptcy that stripped away whatever assets they had left. Megan filed for divorce 6 weeks after sentencing, citing irreconcilable differences worsened by the financial wreckage and relentless public scrutiny. She moved to a modest apartment in Everett, with Lucas and Sophia starting over in a place far smaller and quieter than the one they had lost. The children, now older by nearly a year, still asked about their father, but the answers grew shorter with time. Daniel's law license was suspended indefinitely, his professional reputation shredded beyond repair. The last update I received came through a mutual acquaintance. He was serving his sentence quietly, with no contact attempted toward me. I spent those same months rebuilding what they had dismantled step by deliberate step. I submitted detailed disputes to all 3 credit bureaus, attaching the fraud affidavit, court transcripts, and police reports, until every fraudulent account vanished from my file. The process was slow and methodical: letters, follow-up calls, waiting periods, but 6 months in my score crossed 700 again. With that clean report, I qualified for a modest mortgage on a small 2-bedroom house in the suburbs east of Seattle. The place was nothing extravagant: outdated appliances, a backyard that needed work, creaky hardwood floors, but it had a wide window overlooking Puget Sound, where the water caught the light on clear mornings. I signed the closing documents alone in a quiet office, the pen steady in my hand. No forged signatures or hidden emails, just real income and real choices reflected on the page. The irony wasn't lost on me. The brother who had mocked my underutilized life had forced me to claim the very thing he stole: home ownership on my own terms. Nicole arrived the day I moved in, arms full, with a bottle of champagne and a welcome mat that read, "No identity thieves allowed," in bold black letters. We opened the bottle on the back porch, glasses clinking as the sun dipped toward the water. She raised hers with a grin. "To new roots, and to never letting anyone borrow your name again." I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years, and for the first time the house felt like more than walls. It felt like a beginning. Patricia tried one final call that same week, her voicemail soft and broken. "Rebecca, we miss you." "Daniel's sorry, he's changed. The kids ask about Aunt Becca every day. Please just let us talk, we're still family." I listened once, then deleted it without replying. William sent a single text days later. "We still love you, but we can't cut him out of our lives." I didn't respond to that either. The silence I chose wasn't born of rage. It was clarity. I stopped checking for messages, stopped driving south to Tacoma, stopped explaining or justifying. The family dinners that once defined my weekends became memories I no longer revisited. The phone stayed quiet, and the space it left was filled with books, quiet mornings, and the sound of water lapping in the distance. In the stillness of that new house, with rain tapping the roof and the view of Puget Sound steady outside the window, I finally understood what justice truly demands. It isn't always loud or vengeful. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to walk away from people who value image over integrity, who would rather protect a lie than face the truth. Blood does not grant anyone the right to your peace, your name, or your future. Setting boundaries is not betrayal, it's the only way to survive when trust has been weaponized. Living authentically means refusing to carry someone else's debt, whether it's financial or emotional, and choosing to plant roots in soil that belongs to you alone. I no longer feel the pull of obligation to those who would sacrifice me for their comfort. I feel safe inside my own name for the first time in years, and that safety is worth every fracture it took to reach it. If this story has you thinking about the boundaries in your own life, like and subscribe to follow more real family stories. Sometimes sharing what we've been through is how we discover we're not alone. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.